one needs the seas to be wetter. We don't need all our cheese to be cheddar. Our only needs to get better and better and better and better.
Hey everyone, this is Jessica Jake, and this is the Better and Betterer podcast. It's all about getting better and betterer about this thing we call humaning from the workplace to the weird and how to better get along with each other as well. And that's why I'm excited today to be here with Lambers Fisher, a marriage and family therapist. He's a national speaker on the topic of multicultural awareness and diversity. So welcome, Lambers.
Just gotta appreciate it. Nice to be here.
Yeah, yeah. So that's exciting that you've gone around and done some talks. What's the biggest surprise, like as people come up to you and meet you afterwards? What are they saying?
The biggest surprise is just how receptive people are to a healthier way of having an often difficult conversation. I've been a therapist for 20 plus years. I think I'm 21 years now. And I'm used to staying in my office, on my couch, with the couples and going in deep. But then I started to notice that a lot of my colleagues were wanting to have more variety in the people who they helped, but not really knowing how to do it. And then I also saw a lot of people from various cultural backgrounds saying, maybe I could use some support, but those people over there, I don't think they understand where I'm coming from. And so you got two people on both sides saying, I could use some help and I want to help, but I don't think you want to see me. And so it's like, well, how can I bridge that gap in time and not? And so on a topic that's often difficult, like cultural differences, people get kind of scared and don't know how to bridge that gap. It's like it's always negative. I don't want to say anything wrong. But when I can bring in positive and encouraging strategies for how to do so, then it's less resistance. It's not how dare you ask me to do something new. It's hey, thanks for helping me bridge that gap to not seem as exclusive than I ever really wanted to be. And I can help more people than I thought. And other people can be like, yeah, they don't have the same background, they have the same experience, but they understood more than I thought they would, and they helped more than I thought they'd be able to. And that type of response has just been excellent to see. East, west, north, south, old, young, everywhere between. It has been great to see how many people want to offer as much help and have as many healthy relationships, both personally and professionally, wherever they go.
That's terrific. That's great. Could you share some of the tips you give to close the gaps that you're seeing or people are experiencing?
Sure, sure. So I like to stay true to my marriage and family therapy focus. I never claim to be a DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, policy and procedure manual type of person. I don't have the structural, organizational strategies to make certain things happen. That's not my strength. I help bring couples together. I help bring families together. I help people, coworkers, and things like that. And so I started to see how some of the clients who I had who were couples. I primarily see couples, and so I help people overcome differences. I started to see couples who loved each other, cared about each other, but some of the ways in which they communicated sent different messages to each other. And I'm looking at people on both sides. Wait a minute, you're trying really hard to save the relationship, but you don't think that he's trying. And you're trying really hard to save the relationship, but it doesn't look like she's trying, but they're both trying really hard. They're just using language that the other person doesn't understand. They're using, they're trying to solve problems in ways that the other person doesn't really see. And so when I saw the misunderstanding gaps that can be filled to strengthen relationships in couples, I started to see coworkers who could use those same misunderstanding solutions to strengthen their relationships. Bosses trying to strengthen teams, but not quite knowing how to relate to those different people. It's like, well, it's the same things. How can you identify needs that one person has that the other person doesn't have? And to say, hey, I don't have that need, but I see you have that need and you matter to me. So let me help find ways to meet that need. And all, what, surprise, surprise, the other person feels valued and is more committed to the relationship, professional relationship, than they were before. Misunderstandings clarified, more convenience than inconvenience. So between communication, misunderstandings clarified, investment of and identification of needs, those type of efforts, if we view every professional relationship as just another kind of relationship, then we can say, hey, this is not about the right or the wrong, the policy, the procedures, the initiative, what we put on the website. or how can we punish people into submission versus incentivize people to care about each other and to say, hey, we may be different in some ways, but we have a lot of things in common as well.
Oh, that's really smart. Very smart. And you were mentioning identifying those needs and saying, well, how do I help support you in these needs? Do they elicit from the other one? Do you have tips on like how to draw out like what those needs actually are, or is that something they notice?
Yeah, it's a lot of times it's a matter of recognizing that sometimes in a conversation we can share the conversation and say, how can we both get our needs met? And other times we have to take turns and say, hey, let me not really focus on why you're not doing things my way for a moment, and to say, what unmet need do you really have right now? And how can I meet it? Just to make an investment, knowing full well that eventually it'll come back around your way too. And for when people see, oh, wait a minute, you're not trying to defend your way, justify your way, explain why your way is better than my way. You're actually asking what I need. Not even with a promise to have all the solutions, but taking the time to listen and care in that way plants a seed that has major benefits. It means you have a partner in the brainstorming process rather than opposition to say, no, which one of our needs is going to be met? I have to defend mine, I have to defend mine. That's the same thing I do with couples, and the same thing that works in business situations and community situations. Just to take turns and say, hey, how can I show you that your need matters, and just ask instead of tell you, or ask, why isn't my way good enough for you? Why do you have to change things? Why do you have to make things different and to view it as a threat? A lot of times things that get in the way are people defending themselves from threats that aren't really there. I'm not saying my need overrides your need. I'm saying, can my need come alongside of your need? I know it's inconvenient because it's not your need, but is that possible? And no matter whether it's a top-down position or a unilateral position, a parallel decision, how can we communicate your needs matter? Help me understand you, and hopefully you can return the favor and try to understand me, and we can work together to say, how about we find a way to get both of our needs met.
Oh, that's cool. Very smart. Yeah, it's like what obstacles are you hitting because you're trying to do it the way I literally told you to, and what do you need so that it actually goes more smoothly in your world? And I've seen this a lot in the project teams that I've managed and across departments where like departments literally hated each other, but then I went in as the realist, and sometimes I felt like I had the dream killer role, like salespeople to sell the dream and give us this thing, manage a nightmare because it's literally impossible, and calling it out for what it was, and then seeing like what was going on for each team and what they needed and what was blocking them, if there was some wild design and they're like, if you just came to us, there's a widget that would take us, it would accomplish the same thing for 4 hours worth of work, and this could take 80 hours, like, and being like, oh, well, why don't we have you approve the wireframes before we even show them to the client, right? And opening up that communication, to really understand each other's worlds, really, right? And that work that does happen all the time because you picture it, you're sitting in a meeting hearing something, and my mind as a project manager is like, well, that's over budget, we'll never come in on time if we do that, and I'm thinking all the project management things. The designers were generally like, yeah, let's build this and that, and right, and the developers are probably thinking very logically of like how they're going to code it, and so what's going on, from each of our perspectives. That's key. But I wasn't as point blank as how you are, but I can imagine you're getting it done so much faster by being so upfront and just calling it out. Yeah.
Directness comes in handy, and it is definitely something that needs to be practiced. Trying to find the right words to say. But even if you stumble across it, if someone sees, I mean, picture whether it be your real life scenarios from your past, or just things you've seen spoofed in TV and movies that actually have merit. When somebody's trying to ask someone out and they're
Oh.
stumbling across, well, I was kind of hoping that maybe you would, and the other person isn't always saying, spit it out. You think I would go out with some bumbling fool like you you? No, they see the authenticity. They see the genuineness. You are trying to show me how much you care right now. I'm going to patiently wait and see what you come up with. Not in a judging way, but no matter how it comes out, the care behind it matters more than the polishedness of the words. And if you can find a way to do that, no matter what type of role you're in, leadership or just on the team, to be able to convey, hey, I want to make sure, even though we may seem like we have the best idea, hey, before we finalize this, did anybody have any other ideas that I want to make sure we hear and evaluate before we make a final decision? Because I don't want anybody to feel like they were ignored. No, no, we didn't intentionally ignore you, but that doesn't mean you may not feel like your voice was ignored. You may not feel like everybody else was louder than you. And that's why I said, even in my diversity, equity, inclusion type of efforts, it's not limited to race and ethnicity. We're talking about age and gender and socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, faith, various ways that aren't focusing on different groups of people that may or may not like each other. It's various aspects of our identity that matter to us. And if we feel like we're in a minority in any environment, it can be easy to feel unseen without anybody having to do anything negative. Well, I'm surrounded by a whole bunch of louder, assertive people, and I'm a quieter, introverted type of person. I feel left out. Nobody shut me up, but I didn't feel like anybody explicitly showed that they care for my voice either.
Mhm.
I'm a shorter person around taller people. I'm a this and that. See, no group is on the hook or off the hook. We can all make intentional efforts to say, hey, are everybody's needs getting met? Can we make sure everybody's getting heard? Even if we say, hey, thank you for letting me know for this or that reason, I don't think we can be able to work that in, but I appreciate you sharing. Maybe next time we can work that in. Make sure we're circling back. Like, it's no guarantees for the sameness all across the board, but at least if we're considering as many voices as possible, more often than previously considered, we can make sure that everybody gets their needs met, and that can be awesome.
That is awesome. You mentioned the quieter and introverted people, and for whatever reason, some people would hold back, or even based on the culture of the workplace, not feel safe to like voice dissension or a different idea. Do you have tips on like how to get them to speak up? You said some people are easily asserting, and then this person's quiet, and so so that they'll open their mouth and share, right?
Yeah, I'm a fan of a mutual accountability. With a couple, I will rarely ever, and I want to say never, but I just don't like saying always and never. So I'll just say rarely ever say it's all her fault, it's all his fault, or any combination of genders we're talking about here, as opposed to each person has a different responsibility to help make sure everybody's voices getting heard. So in that example of a group of louder people and introverted person not necessarily sharing more, I don't even always assume that the introverted person is shy. I just assume they're not the loudest person in the room. There could be various reasons why they'll respectfully let the louder people talk, and not even out of a negative judgment, just not out of a assertion to try to impose. And I won't assume that the louder person is inconsiderate, shouting over. They're doing them, and the other person is doing them as well. And so if I value both, not as right or wrong, then I can say both have an opportunity to consider the other. The louder, more fast talking, more assertive person has an intentional accountability opportunity to say before it's done, wait, let me make sure the people who don't sound the same way, who aren't in the same assertiveness bracket, get a chance, get the space to not have to jump over us to talk. If the only people who get to talk are the people who interject, then not everybody gets to speak. But let me have some intentional blank space, a moment of silence for anybody who wants to take that opportunity so that the other people can have that opportunity because that's what they need. And then the introverted person can find a way to either make the most of those opportunities or try to preemptively, before it gets loud, to say, hey, before things get started, raise your hand. Can we make sure that there's a space, there's some gaps in between? I don't have any ideas right now. I want to see how the conversation goes, but I reserve the right to share before it's done. Can we make sure that gets done? They don't have to fight because they did it preemptively or after. Does it, speak now, forever hold your peace? Actually, now I'll raise my hand, even if it's at the end. So they have the opportunity to make the most of gaps, and the people who are assertive have the responsibility to make some gaps, not as a gift, but you see how it's part of that communication. I recall a couple who I worked with, and I'll keep everything confidential because that's what I always do. So I'll change things up a little bit. But there's a couple where one partner was the youngest of several siblings in a household that was loud. And they learned the only way to get heard is to speak up loudly, speak up fast, or you did not want to get heard. If you did not do that, then that's communicating that you did not want your voice to be heard. And that's what that person learned for many years of their life. And the other partner was the oldest of a smaller number, and in a household where quietness was meant respect and yelling meant disrespect. Parents got divorced, and it's correlated with yelling, and so in order to show you care, you do not do that. And so when this couple gets together, and one person is showing that they care by yelling, and the other person is showing that they care by never yelling, then they have a discrepancy. They have a challenge to say, why don't you care about us enough to be intense in this conversation with me? You must be passive. You must not really care. The other person saying, why are you trying to make us get divorced by forcing us to fight loudly and yelling? Because that, and they're having two completely different conversations. They're trying to meet legitimate needs, but in ways the other person doesn't understand. So helping them see why they do what they do and why they need what they need isn't the same thing as changing their need as much as understanding it, communicating it, and then say, okay, well, sometimes the quieter person might need to learn to raise their voice a little bit, have a little bit more as a gift to the other person, not as a correction for right or wrong, just as a gift to the other person. And the louder person can learn to quiet it down a little bit, can learn to make it a little bit intense. Sometimes they have to say it the way they need to say it, and sometimes they can accommodate it. Sometimes the quieter person, and it goes back and forth. But it's sometimes being authentically you, and sometimes being authentically you in the consideration of the other person. And if multiple people are doing that, magic can happen. Oh, I see you trying to do things my way. I won't force you to do that every time because I don't want you to be uncomfortable. Thank you for not taking that for granted. I was trying, and it's a mutual back and forth, and you can do that in any relationship, couples, bosses, co-workers, community, volunteers, whatever the case may be, neighbors, for all I care. Relationships can be strengthened with mutual consideration in ways that can transform conflict resolution into problem solving.
I love that. What a powerful example. That's really good. Yeah, it's fascinating. That's excellent. I'm speechless. Yeah, and I like the way you said that you're not trying to change someone. They're still authentically them, but they're learning to kind of pause and say, "But I know you need this, so I'm gonna give this gap." And I know that um, it's safe for me to actually speak versus being quiet to preserve us and giving me that
Absolutely.
space. So
Absolutely.
it's a beautiful like little seesaw of dance and I guess too, as I love that people are embracing neurodiversity more and more and not forcing people to fit some kind of mold as they show up to work and then be authentic in who they are and people understand that versus them like pretending to be typical, right? And so do you have advice for that? Because I know that's a nice movement in the workplace where we are neurodiversity affirming, trauma informed, and all these great things. But then what does that look like on the day to day so that we can relate to people? Because that's another that, well, neurodiversity, obviously diversity, but even to show up with a trauma informed lens and like understand, like, oh, this person's completely burned out or maybe has something going on. And how do we really, I know that's two questions in one, but I'd love to hear your
No,
thoughts.
but to me, it's the same conversation, and I think you connect them together quite well because it goes to the message of there is no normal. There's only your normal. Everybody thinks that they're average, which is literally not possible for everyone to be average, right? But everybody feels like they're comparing everybody else to them. So when we talk about neurodiversity, there's this concept of there's neurotypical, and then there's that inconvenient neurodiversity, people who are doing things differently, that's making it harder for us to do things the normal, regular way. But the more and more we talk about it, the more and more we make safe the language of neurodiversity, we don't have to make it a negative thing or something you have to hide, something that's going to look bad on your resume. The more we realize there's a lot of neurodiverse people out there. What we describe as neurodiverse is so common. Some have speculated. We'll see what the research and the statistics show in a handful of years. Some show that there might be more neurodiverse people than neurotypical people. You know, all you have to do is cross over 51% to make neurotypical people the smaller minority, and that will be fascinating. It's like, why do you inconvenient neurodiverse people all over the place? You know, it's like then it's less of a what it really has an impact of is to say, why do we have to make special accommodations to inconvenience the majority to help out the minority? Well, we're making accommodations for everyone. Everyone in some way can be made to feel special, can be made to feel like, okay, you have different needs. Every leader can find a way to say, your needs matter. I'm going to find a way to do it. Every leader on the team says not everybody has the same level of encouragement or needs the same level of encouragement, has the same skill set. And how can I make a way that everybody gets to shine? Everybody gets to feel seen and valued as a part of the team, no matter your similarities or differences. There's no difference between that and applying that to neurodiversity, different faith beliefs. Does your faith belief have to become the company's new mission? No. But can we make it safe for you to express your faith in your own way and be okay being here? Your gender differences, your age differences, your political differences. Do we have to hide our political differences? Or can we just share them just as much as we share anything else and know that it's safe to just be us? You do you, I do me, and it's safe for us to be us. The more environments that we can make more healthy environments we can create where people can feel safe to be them and to feel valued, not despite those differences, but in consideration of those differences. Then you can just add neurodiversity to it. You can add any factor to it and say, okay, you're you. Tell me all the ways you're you. In some ways you're typical. In some ways you're not. In some ways you're a minority. And age might be a majority, and gender might be a minority, and sexual orientation might be a majority, and politically might be a minority. We can all identify in different ways, and we can all try to make it safe for us to be ourselves in every environment and for others to do the same.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. So it's back to that same question, asking about needs, feeling
Yeah,
safe to show up as yourself. Maybe we'll call that the podcast Showing Up as Yourself with Lambers Fisher, right?
I like it. I like it.
And and yeah,
Yeah,
just bringing that care. You said, right, it's less about the question or what you say, but you have to have that care in your heart. And I really think people do. And if they feel like they don't, they just have to remember that they do, right? I very briefly took Kung Fu. I didn't even, actually, I took it for quite a long
nice.
time, but didn't even learn, did not even earn the white belt. So, nothing. But the teacher would always say, like, we already know what's right in our heart, right? Like something like that. He said something to that effect. And that always stuck with me. And it's true, right? I don't need to read a book or a guide or an employee code of conduct or leadership this or that, right? Like it's like when you actually like take a breath and like just let your heart shine a little bit or uncover its beautiful shine that's always there,
Yeah.
you'll care, right? So
That's the goal. And I find that more people care than we think.
oh
There's so
yeah.
much
No, they
negativity going around. People think that you have to force people to. That's why one of the things that can be unhealthy about certain multicultural awareness and diversity type of initiatives is the feeling, which is reasonable but not the healthiest, that you have to punish people into caring.
mm,
You should care or else. Care because that's how I read a lot of policy and procedure manuals. You should consider diversity or else. You should care about others' well-being or else. These are the list of consequences. And if I think in a marriage, hey, you better be a good spouse or else is not the way to create a lasting relationship. That's not the way to do it. As opposed to helping them find ways to say, I believe that you already care, but I think there's some things getting in the way of you showing it. Let's
mm,
work together to reduce some of those barriers. You feel like you're getting singled out? Let's show how everybody's getting valued. Nobody's getting left out. Somebody feels like they're getting left out more so than you. Let's find a way to make sure we're valuing everybody. You know, some people are feeling valued in some ways, but devalued in other ways. Have you ever felt devalued? How did that feel? I know you didn't intentionally do it, but some things that you're doing are conveying that message to somebody else. I hear you. I hear you that you're not trying to do it, but would you be willing to work with me to help make sure that that unintentional message isn't being conveyed, just like you wouldn't want it to be conveyed to you? See, that changes the conversation. We don't have to eliminate the programs in order to bring this positivity. We just modify them so that we can make intentional efforts to make everyone feel valued, not just some. And I think that's a healthier conversation to make things, better than they were before.
Yeah, yeah. You can't dictate love or care, and you
Right.
can't punish people into either. So
Yeah.
letting them see that they do care. And I think I really believe that too, that people are that we all have that perfect. I don't know what to equate it with, but even if you say spirit or soul, or you could say heart in the workplace, and a
Yeah.
lot of stuff just like covers that on over. Like, oh, I learned that I shouldn't yell, or bad things will happen, so I'm going to show up quiet, or I learned this, and all these rules and stuff kind of block that shine. But as people really demonize one side versus the other in the political divide. I'm like, well, if we were all standing around a well and a little kid or even a little deer fell in the well, like
Uh,
everyone, like all like humanity will shine. Everyone, it doesn't matter what t-shirt they're wearing. We're all gonna come together and help and like remembering that, right? And yeah, so I love your approach to this where there's no there's not a blame, it's just that reminder of caring and uncovering what other people need because you have needs too, and it's reciprocal.
that's a good summary. Exactly. The more we can do that, the better.
Yeah, yeah. And we definitely need to.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, the more people can find ways to intentionally do that, I think it'll get more creative. I don't necessarily hold people to a expectation of immediate success, immediate perfect language and perfect behavior and perfect interactions, as opposed to the more we all see each other trying, then we can have grace to help correct things without it being a threat. A lot of times people are protecting themselves from threats that don't exist. They seem like threats, they sound like threats, but they're actually just somebody else trying to get their need met, just like you're trying to get your needs met. So if we preemptively show other people, I see your needs and I'm trying to see them more and more, and I care about them, then the other person's like, well, how can I get mad at someone intentionally trying to meet my need? I mean, they're floundering around about doing it, but let me help clarify. You think you're meeting my need, but you're really not. If you really want to, this is the way you can do that. And being receptive to that's like, oh, not, well, fine. And if you don't like the way I'm doing it, no, no. Thank you for letting me know. Thank you for correcting. I appreciate you doing that so I can meet your need more specifically. And then it's like, well, yeah, how can I meet your need? You meet my need. That mutuality, it will change the conversation. And I hope that's something that can be contagious in a
Yeah.
positive way. It can kind of build on and say, I liked how I was treated over here. I want to keep that going. And I believe that I can be a part of that, one person at a time. I can be a part of that and encourage someone else to do the same. And it just keeps on going. That would be awesome. That would
Yeah, and
be,
modeling that for your team. I do some work in the agile space and I see these things on LinkedIn and it's basically like run from these animals of agile. And one that stood out because I've heard it before was the hippo, the highest paid opinion. But it like had this whole list of like animals and the advice was basically like stay away from these animals. And, and I'm like, no, they each person, like if you're talking to a hippo, it's like, wow, thanks for that opinion. That's an amazing perspective. I know you have this wealth of like talent and success, and thank you for sharing that. And let's see
and
what other angles, right? Like so instead
there you go.
there's no advice. And I see posts like that on all sorts of things, like similar takes on it of basically like these are bad and like without saying this is a human and this is they have needs
Yeah,
or they want to share. They're sharing because they want your product to be
there it
amazing.
is. There it is. Yeah, seeing the value behind the differences. say, yes, it's inconvenient that we're different, but there are strengths. There's so many couples that I've seen where one person may be a little bit more, not just assertive, but aggressive. And the other person is explicitly not. So one's a little bit more on the aggressive side, one's a little bit more on the passive side. They're trying to be healthy, but they recognize it. But they don't mind. Somebody on the outside be like, how could you be with that passive, timid person? Or how could you be with that aggressive person? And it kind of says, like, it's nice to be with somebody who isn't the same aggressiveness as me. That person keeps me level. That person reminds me, not because they're controlling or they're, holding me with a leash. No, that person keeps me honest. They remind me that I don't have to or even want to always have to be aggressive. And the other person says, well, hey, picture this. If somebody steps to us and I'm not going to do it, I know that person's gonna go off. It's nice to be with somebody else who has a different skill set. Even if we're not talking about a fight, even if we're talking about just like at a restaurant, something comes out wrong with the meal. I might not be willing to say something, but I know my partner will. And we're gonna get a better meal out of this. It's like, so even if it's just humorous stuff,
A spider.
contrasting skills. Yeah, yeah. Exactly. You can have differences that actually come in handy.
Yeah.
Differences to say, hey, I don't have that skill set. I don't have that tendency. I would have never thought about that. You know what? It's convenient to be different. But to me, that just goes to this grid that I have in my head at all times in some kind of ways. Almost how I see the world between the pros and cons of similarities and differences. So we can say, well, it's convenient to be similar because we don't have to waste time explaining things and asking all those questions. We just already know. But it's inconvenient to be similar sometimes because brainstorming is very boring.
Mhm.
Everybody has the same ideas. Nobody has anything new to contribute. So then it becomes convenient to be different sometimes because you can have a variety of ideas, a variety of life experiences that contribute to hopefully a better idea and better products and better services in the end, even while it's inconvenient to be different because you have to do a little bit more explaining and clarifying. But there's pros and cons to similarities and differences. For us to just run toward one and eliminate all of the other ones is a very limited life. And when we can maximize the pros and the cons of both, then every individual, every relationship, every team, every organization has the potential to be that much more impactful.
Awesome. 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 So, where can we find you and all this goodness that you're sharing for people who want to hear more, read more, see more?
Cool. Well, first of all, I'm very easy to find in the sense that my website is my name, lambersfisher.com. There's not a lot of Lamberses out there, so I'm pretty sure if you find it, you'll find me. But just in case you can't find Lambers because no one knows what a Lambers is, I can also be found at the same website, can also be reached at diversitymadesimple.com because that's really what I'm trying to do. Uh, Demystify, destigmatize, depolarize, and just make it simple and practical for everyday life. So if people look up diversitymadesimple.com, they can find me, they can find my podcast, to try to offer some general services, just some helpful tips to help people navigate this challenge. But also for the readers out there, the people who read on their commute to work or just when in downtime, they can also find my book, which is titled "Diversity in Clinical Practice," with a subtitle of "Practical and Shame-Free Strategies to Reducing Cultural Offenses and Repairing Cross-Cultural Relationships." It's got a nice title, and I wrote it initially for my fellow therapists, so that I could help them bridge those gaps. But I wrote it in such a neutral way, in such a psychology-free jargon way that people have benefited in a variety of different helping fields. I read it just so practical that just like I'm trying to help therapists bridge those divides with their clients, I'm helping teachers bridge cultural divides with their students, and business leaders bridge cultural divides with their teams, and law enforcement officers bridge cultural divides with everyone they encounter on the street in their work to say any similarities or differences. Here's some practical strategies to help not shame yourself, not judge yourself, but also to help other people feel culturally seen, heard, and understood while helping yourself feel culturally seen, heard, and understood in the process, even when sometimes you don't feel like they have a culture at all that needs to be seen. We can say, hey, no, we all matter. We all deserve to feel seen and feel special and feel valued in that way. And if I can help with that, then hey, find me at my name, lambertsfisher.com, and reach out, and I'm happy to help if I can.
Wow. And I'm glad you mentioned that people are taking that book that you wrote for clinical practice and using it in other contexts because I was gonna, that's exactly where my brain went when you mentioned it. I was like, oh, but we could use that here too, right?
Exactly.
Because people are people, wherever you go, and this will help no matter what you're finding yourself doing or workplace or otherwise. So
That is the
amazing.
idea.
Well,
Glad to help.
thank you so much. It's been great talking with you and definitely love your ideas. I love your perspective and what you're sharing with the world. And I'm certainly happy to help amplify it on the airwaves, as it
Thanks for
were.
helping. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for helping. I hope other people are encouraged by it as well, and they can take it and run with it and impact people in their environments as well.
Awesome. Take care.
You too. Bye.
This is lovely. Sunlight streaming on better.